Hello, that's me again. Today is April 25th, 2025. It is Friday, and I want to start with obvious. Actually, I repeated it all the time, and this is not my thought. Any military or intelligence professional will tell you that, real professionals, of course, that terrorism is the weapon of the weak. What you see here is the explosion of the in the beginning, the explosion of the car of the deputy chief of the main operational directorate of the general staff of Russia, Mr. Moskalik. Lieutenant General Moskalik, who was actually known to be the part of, since 2015, of many all kinds of the military negotiations, especially in Ukraine, and the guy was obviously important figure in GO, which is called Главное оперативное управление, the main operational directorate, and this has all hallmarks of. Obviously, GUR, which is Ukrainian so-called intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense, and of course you have London behind it and some rogue elements, and for example from American or other special services, but primarily the both blame and suspicion falls on the people from MI6 who are like England, who are impotent in every single respect except for conducting terrorism. This is all against the background of, obviously, as everybody understands now, successful negotiation of Mr. Putin and Mr. Witkov, and Mr. Ushakov, who is the aide of Mr. Putin, says that positions of the United States and Russia are beginning to kind of come together. It still have a lot of work to do, but the hysteria, especially in the British-owned media, for example, Reuters. I mean, Reuters used to be the British media, and now it's Canadian or whatever the hell it is. Now, they leaked the plan. And you have to understand that Europe is in panic because I can tell you one thing. There is this admission by one of the world. He's not even, I don't think he is even opposition per se. Mr. Piankovsky is known to be an absolute direct shield for NATO and all kinds of the Jewish genocidal plans around the world. But he actually is in panic. He posted this thing that for some reason, evidently he fell with his face on keyboard, but he is absolutely correct that we are observing the de facto demolition of NATO. It doesn't mean that it will dissolve itself, like already have been discussed many times, that somehow the conference of all those participants happens and they sign some paper basically dissolving NATO. No, it's not going to be like this at all, but de facto is gonna, that's how it's going to happen. And Reuters, I'm not gonna go again about Reuters leaking allegedly some Trump's plan, which supposedly, Crimea is de jure part of Russia. De facto, all those four oblasts are actually accepted by Russia and remain de facto Russian, and things of this nature. And the ridiculous claims, for example, the Zaporozhye nuclear plant, United States gets their gets their possession of it. It's all delirium, but there is no denial. There is no denial here of this. If you take a look at plan, which whatever the Europe invents it's supposed to be, here it is immediately. All kinds of plans are now, look at this bunch of the losers sitting there. Kiev and its European backers have turned down President Donald Trump's reported peace plan. Exactly, the key phrase reported for the Ukraine conflict in several significant respects, according to a report by Reuters, citing the full text of the US proposal and their response. First, keep in mind, you cannot trust media. Western media, establishment media, they are propaganda outlets and war criminals for the most part. Don't believe them. But But there is no denial that we see there are divergence actually of the American and European views on the global security. And here comes this fundamental issue that, well, how to put it, mildly or politely, if you wish. If you take a look at Kiev, for example, 2 days ago, you can see yourself a very good fireworks and Russians well deliver. You can see yourself Kinzhal arriving, to some bunkers in Kiev already. Russians continue to pummel Ukraine, and they will continue to do so. And even if you take a look at yesterday's tally, so to speak, which is horrible tally, but fact is, you can see yourself, Russia continues to roll over Ukraine, and you have pretty much stabilized numbers around 1,500 a day that Russians killed. And so Europe is in panic because obviously, and it has to be understood clearly, that Europeans, well, at least most of them, they hate Russia. And they are desperate after they saw that essentially United States was defeated. I mean, whenever people say and use this term, which is really a meme actually, now it's Yalta 2.0. It's not Yalta 2.0. United States cannot be a broker, and it's not on the winning side. The only thing which is happening right now, that because Trump tries to somehow play it that it is Biden's war and his time is running out to do it, and he needs to extricate pardon me he needs to extricate United States from the this conundrum in Ukraine, because obviously the United States sustained the strategic defeat. But Europe, which has no resources, which is in a complete demographic descent, if you wish, but in reality demographic catastrophe and economic catastrophe, which is ongoing as we speak. So for them and for those elites, so-called elites, such as Macron, such as Starmer, such as this cesspool of the German politics, the only way for them to hold on to power is, guess what? Is to continue with this war. Because if this war stops, so to speak, and Russians get what they stated to, political and military and geographic, if you wish, aims from the get-go, it's over for them. Russians know how the processes are developing. They have the ability to predict them, by the way, which probably Mr. Moskalik, who was killed in the terrorist act, granted. His death was also, well, if you can say so, exacerbated by the fact that he for some reason was driving the car which was on the natural gas, and obviously during explosion natural gas only added dramatically actually to the power of explosion. But the point is Russians do have ability to forecast, to see the future, nearest and strategic future. And what we know now, that actually the negotiations, which not really negotiations, Mr. Peskov called it correctly, well, shuttle diplomacy. Mr. Witkoff is doing what United States hasn't done for a long time. He is doing the actual diplomacy. He is running a shuttle between Washington and Moscow, trying to settle things, and evidently after that, today's meeting, 3 hours with Vladimir Putin, he flew to Oman to meet people in regards to Iran. And for people who are wondering what is going on here, as I stated before, I think Russians and Americans in general, they understand the framework, strategic framework of, well, essentially the fait accompli. United States lost, but Russians are willing to give their off-ramp because obviously, they're two superpowers, they need to communicate on a completely different level. But Iran is untouchable. Russians, this is the main conditions for Russians to doing anything. And as already has been stated many times by Mr. Lavrov, Mr. Putin, Mr. Peskov, Mr. Ushakov, and I can continue this list for on and on and on until we understand that the Russians are interested not so much in Ukraine. Doug McGregor is absolutely correct. Russians do not want to govern those people. They are enemies of Russia. They hate Russian gods. Russians, of course, will take Novorossiya, but the rest of it, Russians don't need it. They just need it to be obviously absolutely neutral and absolutely, well, devoid of any kind of the serious military industry, and that is going to happen. But it is all about the larger framework of the global security, and Iran is the part of it. And Mr. Witkoff, after Mr. Putin, went for Oman. And there's going to be discussion with the experts and representatives of Iran, obviously. And yes, the war with Iran must, and I believe at this stage, have been, prevented, and that's good news. So, and that is that fits into larger, so to speak, framework of Russian geopolitical interest. So now, if you go further, we suddenly have this thing, and this actually explains to you why Europe behaves as it behaves. So here it is. This is Times, London's Times, no less. And of course, they continue to humiliate themselves, you know what, every possible way. And sadly, Times says that UK could scrap plans to send thousands of troops to Ukraine. I have news for United Kingdom, and this is for Europe, which actually is involved in the terrorist activities through the Ukrainian diaspora in Russia, and that, well, they don't have thousands of troops. They simply have no army, and UK has to understand this, that the only thing they can do, because they're weaklings, they can kill civilians, children, women, commit terrorist acts, but terrorism is the, well, weapon of the weak. But suddenly Times says that British sources said that it was deemed too risky to send ground forces because of the risk of the wider conflict if a ceasefire deal with Russia broke down. No, it's not the risk of a wider conflict, it's the risk that they will be annihilated, and United Kingdom has zero ability to do anything of this. So they will be throwing their basically cannon fodder, British cannon fodder, into Russian meat grinder, and Russians will gladly oblige to make sure that they do not return home. And in apparent softening of plans, Britain and Europe would no longer have a ground force guarding key cities, ports, and nuclear power plants to secure the peace. Oh no, they're not securing the peace, at least the plan. And so, you know what, they continue to pretend that they matter, and obviously there are some circles. I'm not saying that all of them are like that, but most of them, for example, British elite is like this. They hate Russian gods, and they do everything they can possibly do to, well, basically sabotage everything what is happening between United States and Russia. And there are so many, so to speak, directions in which we can discuss and elaborate on the issue of Europe, both now hating Trump administration, because we're looking at the uber-liberal or neoliberal elites, which are, well, they culturally and physically genocidal, and they are totalitarian sect, essentially. Europe is nothing but totalitarian sect. And those people, for them, the war must continue for them to stay in power. It doesn't work like this. First, they are militarily incompetent and pathetic. If you look attentively at French armed forces, I already made some forays, so to speak, into discussing that. They are the best armed forces Europe has, and they are pathetic. I mean, their ground army is like 113,000. Yeah, they will be able to put out there about more than 20,000 of the actually combat-ready troops. Not to speak about the extremely low level of the technical readiness of their, for example, pathetically low numbers of the same Leclerc tanks, which they pathetically claim the best tank in the world. Why don't they send it to Russia? Russians, those guys, they have their mortgages to pay. They would gladly oblige and burn them all. So, and the same, about between the 15 and 35% technical readiness of their air fleet, primarily Rafales. Mirages are just falling apart in the air. So, and when you look at this, who the hell you are? That's the question which Russians ask, and they know that all those plans, those money, all those, grandiose statements from those people mean nothing. They're absolutely hollow, and the only way for them is the panic. It's address this panic because they want to stay in power. We discussed this yesterday with Garland Nixon. You can go to YouTube and go to Garland's channel, and you will see yourself us discussing it. And then we have this other thing, apart from those cracks, if you wish. Now they're becoming crevices, actually, between United States and Europe. And Russians obviously observe this and they say, oh, that's good. That's what we want. That when people say that de facto the NATO will be disintegrating, let me put it this way. Remember one of the clauses of the famous Russian Foreign Ministry December 2021, on the eve of the start of the special military operation, the letter, so to speak, or a list of demands. And it was about rolling NATO to the borders of the 1997. Well, guess what? The way things are developing, there will be no NATO at all as the actual military alliance, military political alliance, because inevitably United States has different civilizational path than Europe. Europe is done. 500 years of the combined West are over, and they have to accept this fact. And what is interesting, Mr. Lavrov, when speaking about all kinds of the things today, look at this. So if you go and take a look at that, you can see yourself. French deputies expressed their desire to visit Russia on Victory Day. There you go. That's interesting. French parliament people, they want to come to Russia for Victory Day. The Russian Foreign Ministry announced the interest of French MPs to take part in the celebration of the 80th anniversary of the victory to Moscow. Lavrov said that a significant number of French deputies in the European Parliament expressed a desire to come to Russia for the celebration dedicated to the 80th anniversary of the victory. He made the statement during the ceremony of awarding the president of the Franco-Russian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Emmanuel Guit, with the Order of Friendship. So there you go. The contacts still continue, and there are some people, absolutely correctly, who also in Europe, they see where it is all going. It is already kind of arrived to the point of Europe being utterly defeated, economically, militarily, culturally. Some of it Russia did, others, they did it on themselves. And when I talk about NATO, how about, look at this, it was prescient, if you wish, or prescient, some people say, caricature from 1950s. Look at this. That's what they drew there in one of the 1952. Look at this. They called it European Union. And as you can see yourself, it actually precisely reflects what is going on right now. Well, look at this. I cannot put it more bluntly than that. And this is exactly what is happening, because different interests, and as it was always, before those ideas of the common European market and, which was essentially the economic union of the coal and steel, now it became the European Union. This is a stupid idea, actually, and we saw ourselves how it degenerated in the European Commission, which is not elected. Bunch of the moron bureaucrats, if you look attentively at von der Leyen or all those people, who essentially killed Europe. And so Europeans wanted it at some point of time. Of course, they were sold all kinds of the idealistic BS. In reality, everything went downhill immediately, practically. And so, except with some few projects, such as Airbus, for example. But this propaganda basically thing reflects it perfectly. And this is what is happening with Europe. And this is why this panic, and this is why, because those elites are absolutely desperate. They need war. They need whatever. They need to unleash whatever the kind of the terrorism. If the children, women, civilians die, it doesn't matter for them. Those people have no morality, they have no integrity, and they have no humanity. There is nothing human about, for example, most of the German politician, about Macron and his administration, and about Starmer. Those people are not normal humans. Many of them are war criminals, and they have to be persecuted by, well, there is no international court which can do that, but Russians can judge them, so to speak, and charge them in absentia, many of them. I would do that, but of course, Russian government knows way better than me, and as many people continue to not recognize this issue, I have to reiterate it. Don't expect to know more than, for example, Mr. Putin knows, because what is being put on his table each morning, and those people who brief him, we don't even know what they are talking about. But we know that the information and knowledge they share each morning at the briefing, including for the Russia Security Council, this is the level of the analysis and information which is simply beyond our grasp. And what we can discuss, which I don't like, I became the political commentator, is constantly this, those proceedings which we see in the public sphere, especially in public media sphere. Believe me, the real world is a little bit different, and what we see only some outward manifestations of it, which do not necessarily always reflect the reality. However, I want to point out to one reality which, the national interest magazine. It's not anymore Dmitry Simes Jr. Publication. He used to be its publisher, but Dmitry Simes lives in Moscow now, and which is really ironic. But here it is. They suddenly admit it went after Dmitry Simes departed. It went completely exceptionalist, and here we are. And suddenly they have to admit this thing. Look at this. Yeah, it's yesterday. They say Russia's Zircon hypersonic missile is a disaster for NATO. For some reason they rendered Kinzhal here, but okay, Zircon looks a little bit different, and we don't even know how its nose looks like. But obviously Zircon looks like a SP-800, well, most of it, Onyx missile, because it is based loosely at it. Obviously different propulsion, different everything else, but the general form looks like this. And so they talk about that Russia's Zircon missile is a disaster for NATO, which is correct. And he makes, if you go and read this article, it's like, well, yeah, essentially the guy who writes it, he admits that, my gosh, it has strategic effect, actually. Far from all this being new tactics and new complete technological basically environment in the naval warfare, or for that matter, any kind of warfare, Zircon was successfully used at the land targets. So they say that Zircon has already upset the precarious balance of military power between the United States and Russia. The growth of this system, while the Americans find it difficult to field its own similar system or to create countermeasures against hypersonic weapons, risks ensuring that the Russians enjoy the dominant position. Unless America finds a countermeasure of its own hypersonic weapons, that balance of power with Russia will forever tilt in Moscow's favor. It already did, because the United States cannot field not only hypersonic weapon, but as I spoke on many occasions, and it was written first time in 2019, today it was fully confirmed when you look at the performance of, for example, the Patriot, which is the best air defense complex the United States ever could produce. And some people said, oh, SM-6 theoretically can intercept Zircon or Kinzhal. It cannot. But basic calculations, when we have been talking about trivial, non-trivial, but still very small probabilities of intercept, even basic models of probabilities, if you take a look attentively at that, they tell you everything you need to know about the what hypersonic weapons do in naval warfare, or for that matter, any kind of warfare. I want to remind you, I already did it before. You see, if we even consider required probability of at least 0.9 of intercept of a single, make no mistake, single Zircon or Kinjal, which are Mach 9 and higher and have an immense range. We're looking at, if for example 0.2, this was actual probability which was not rumored, it was stated by some American sources. And so if you calculate even that, if somehow they want to intercept the zircon with the probability of 0.9, they will need, under ideal conditions, roughly, well, 11 missiles. And again, it doesn't mean that they will intercept it. It just merely tells you the required force to, if they can actually develop even the, which they don't see them anymore. We know they don't see Kinjal on the radar, they don't see Zircon. And so, yeah, it's 10 missiles, let's say this. But in reality, of course, if we go to the probabilities which were more realistic, actually, which is, of course, you needed the probability of the 0.1, well, what can I say? You will need 21 missiles, and again, this is not really, how to put it, guarantees anything. It just merely gives you approximate value of the force which is required under certain conditions to intercept it. In reality, as I already stated, this is all dependent on the fact that they detected it and developed firing solution. The problem is, you don't see it, and you cannot develop firing solution, and that is why what was demonstrated by the demolition of the air defense systems in during special military operation by both Zircon 3M22 when it was launched at the ground targets, and by hypersonic Kinjal, which you already saw yourself there, how it arrives in Kiev yesterday. So there's no way. And they are correct. This guy from the national interest, he is correct. It's shifted the balance dramatically and in favor of Russia. And the United States is not even in the race here, because essentially Russia already is beginning to transition to actually second generation of the hypersonic weapons, which are even faster, which are even longer range, and we can only, guess what kind of the algorithms, neural networks actually within they operate within. So, and that makes things very, very difficult, rather impossible for essentially any kind of the naval force to do anything about it. And that is why as I mentioned prior, a few videos back, that Andrei Belousov, Minister of Defense, and many people from Russian Security Council, they correctly state, including Mr. Moiseev, who is the Supreme Commander of Russian Navy, that we have everything we need to repel any kind of the threat. So, and that will be, just as you already know, and I mentioned it many times, with those $100 billion, well, which probably equivalent of around 300, if not 400 billion dollars, Russian Navy is feeling pretty darn good. So much for this economy, which, as Mr. Obama said, is in tatters. And what can I say? This is, sometimes you just have to, cringe, or, shrug your shoulders, because it's difficult to even explain how they think, those people in the West. But they are the leaders today, and nothing we can do about it for now. So this is what I wanted to tell you today for this Friday, guys. And as always, those who like what I do, please subscribe to my channel. And those who can afford, please support me by buying me a couple of coffee here and there, and on Patreon. I would really appreciate your support. So have a nice weekend, and I'll talk to you later, guys. Bye-bye.